Hello, I am Lila Mary, and this week I'm interviewing author and illustrator, webcomic artist PK Finn about his
Hello.
webcomic The Lost. So, hello, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Of course. So, to start us off, could you give us a short summary of The Lost in your own words?
Yes. So, The Lost is a comedic science fiction webcomic set in interstellar space. It follows a group of four unlikely allies forced to work together after a screw up of incredible proportions results in them having to run away from a literal media empire. It's got four protagonists. They are the champion of the Colosseum, where we begin, is the last of a people known as the Varied, which are a group of shapeshifters capable of becoming both organic life forms and also we have Silence, who was the champion's last opponent. She's a teenage girl sent to the Colosseum as a tribute to maintain peace with the Empire. There is Ano, who is an assassin with a malfunctioning psychic implant that occasionally blows up other people's heads, and Ghost, a janitor working in the Colosseum, who is getting high in the bathroom of an escape pod, which is the one the other three use to escape when Ano's implant kills the wrong person and sets off the plot. It's aiming to be a comedy first and foremost, but it's also dramatic and dark when it needs to be.
I absolutely love that. What a wonderful, weird blending of genres that just lends to the perfect amount of comedy.
Yeah.
Favorites are hard for authors, but do you have a favorite element of world building within the comic? Because there is just so much wonderful world building.
Yes. My personal favorite is something that will be shown off right at the start of chapter 4, which I have begun work on already. But the fun fact is that 99% of interstellar ships capable of warping and going into faster than light travel are actually other varied, and the engine rooms are these awful amalgamations of psychic crystal, machine, and flesh.
This is so cool. I absolutely adore that. What made you decide to turn The Lost into a webcomic instead of a graphic novel or some other format?
I figured that, honestly, a webcomic was just the most conducive to the themes I wanted to tackle. Because I'm kind of going for a world where internet drama has become real world drama on an unimaginable scale. It felt most fitting to put it on the internet, you know? And it also means that in terms of a graphic novel, I don't have to worry so much about the formatting. And also, like a web novel, I wanted to lean into the, this is a story that's quote unquote being recorded for the audience to watch. The comic felt more like it was that sort of thing than a web novel would have been.
I think any of those formats would have offered a different perspective on the story and probably would have changed the story in different ways, but the web comic format really does feel perfect.
Yeah, felt the most thematic too.
Describe the process of making a chapter. Does art or writing come first? How long does it typically take you? Things like that.
Generally, the steps for making a chapter start with scripting. I have a whole script document where I just write the dialogue and essentially scene direction for myself, and I usually write that several chapters in advance. So even though chapter 3 is out right now, I have written all the way through chapter 6 with plans and scattered scenes set out all the way through chapter 9 or 10. Then, after I have a script done and I have the full chapter written, I will jump into a thumbnail document on my computer. Thumbnails are like the painting equivalent of a loose outline, where you lay out major plot points and character arcs and rearrange them in order to get the best impact. For the comic, I use thumbnails to lay out the panels to make sure it's the most readable, you know? It's also usually the stage where if I know I'm going to have complex backgrounds, I tend to set those up either using The Sims or by actually 3D modeling the objects so that I have a good reference to use. And then when I actually go and do the art, the full page usually takes between 2 and 5 days, depending on like the complexity of what's going on. Line art, or just like the outlines of the characters, tends to take up more than half of that time, whereas coloring and lighting I can usually get done in like 1 day, maybe 1.5, and that's per page. There's usually between 4 and 6 pages in a scene, and the scenes are what I drip feed to my Patreon supporters every other week. And then there are several scenes in every chapter. I'm kind of hoping that they'll average out to 5 overall. Chapter 3 was something like 11 scenes, which was rough. But I generally try and do like a scene every 2 weeks. I tend to have a bit of a backlog before I start on the full chapter.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your long-term plans for The Lost? When will you consider it complete?
I'm not totally sure. Like, I have plans for story arcs for every character, including characters we haven't met yet. I have ideas for things that reach beyond the current plans. I even have like ideas for bonus scenes that won't be like part of chapters, but they'll be supplemental and plot relevant. I'm not sure so much about when I'll feel like the ending is done. It kind of feels... I have a tendency to write stories about like revolutions or like big changes happening in certain people, and right now it feels a little disingenuous to plan this revolution story to have an end that isn't like open-ended, but we'll see how I feel in like a decade or so when I've gotten to chapter 30, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I kind of like that you don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to end, and that you're kind of growing along with the story.
Yeah.
What is the part of creating a chapter that excites you the most?
Honestly, every part has its excitement. It's easier to talk about like the part that's least exciting, which for me is doing the lines, because they're tedious and difficult. But probably the most like exciting is when I do the coloring and lighting, because that's when everything just comes together with a bow on the top, you know?
Matches the vision that you have in your head.
Yes, exactly.
How do you decide when to release a chapter?
The final release date of a chapter itself is less set in stone than the starting week. Because I do a Patreon drip feed, and because I script everything first, it's sometimes hard to tell how long it will take me to fully get all of the drip feed out. So it's usually I decide that I'll start dropping on Patreon about a month or two before I actually do that, and then the release date just kind of happens naturally as I finish it up.
Yeah, that makes sense. What were your inspirations for the art style of The Lost?
Art style wise, I have a few people whose names come to mind. The first one is Ryoko Kui, who is the creator of Dungeon Meshi, among a few other different comedic manga. There's also Kate May, who has done the art for the character art on Dimension 20 for several years at this point, if not the whole time. Michael Kaluta, who was the artist for the Starstruck comics. Sam Does Art, who is a YouTube and Instagram artist, whose style has inspired a lot of mine. And Junji Ito, who is another manga artist best known for horror, like The Enigma of Amigara Fault, and other like short horror manga. And there are probably like dozens and dozens more that I've been inspired by because their work showed up on whatever feed. Those are the ones I can like put a name to.
Yeah, Junji Ito especially has such a unique and very recognizable art style, in my opinion. And now that I'm thinking about it, I can see a little bit of his work in your art style.
Yeah, it mostly shows up in the more gory scenes.
Yeah,
I really
that's
like
amazing
how
for
he
Junji
does
Ito.
that stuff.
Yeah. What does The Lost mean to you?
You gave me this question. It was a really hard one to figure out. In terms of like what the story means as a creator, is it means connecting with people and sharing laughs in the face of these awful things that are happening every day all around the world. And it always means there's like something consistent and something to smile about. Even though there's always going to be another bad thing, there's also, we're going to keep existing, you know?
I think it's so important for artists and creators to keep making comedy, art that is lighthearted and art that brings comfort and hope. especially in times like
Yeah,
these, so that people have something to recharge their batteries, so that people can keep fighting another day. It's
exactly.
not, it's quite the opposite of useless or out of touch or whatever some people might say about people who keep making art. I think back to that famous quote of queer people fighting for rights during the AIDS crisis, when they would bury their friends in the morning, protest in the afternoon, and then dance at night to keep
Yeah,
them going for the next day so that they could do it all over again. And
yes,
that's what art like this, like The Lost, that's very weird and silly and fun and colorful. That's the effect it has, is especially for queer people, giving them
yes,
a release and escape. Escapist
yeah,
art is very, very necessary.
yes. And also with like, especially like the horror aspects, I have found that often in the like toughest, scariest moments of my life, getting to read horror has meant I have something else to be scared about, you know?
Yeah, it's a controlled, safe way to be scared on purpose in a way that you consent to, almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I know that the readers of The Lost will pick up on that, on all of those things that you mentioned.
Thank you.
And speaking of the readers, are there any moments that you can't wait for readers to experience for the first time?
Oh, I'm very excited for people's reactions to what Ghost in particular has going on. It's very crazy, completely unexpected for what he is. I'm not going to spoil it, but I'm excited for when that reveal happens.
Ghost is one of my favorite characters because he is such a mystery, so I'm excited to learn what his backstory entails. What do you hope readers take away from reading The Lost?
I hope that they take away that they're never alone. No matter how much you feel like you're the only person experiencing the things you are, there's always going to be someone else who gets it, and by extension you. Maybe you won't be friends, but at least you won't be alone.
That's lovely, and that definitely comes through in the themes of The Lost. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered here?
Yes, I would like to do a little bit of a shout out to some of the other mediums that have inspired me, and writers especially, that have inspired a lot of the tone of The Lost. I would highly recommend The Dark Prophet Saga by J. Zachary Pike. Prophet as in capitalism, not like an oracle. It's a lovely and heartfelt satire about capitalism in fantasy world. I can also highly recommend the Starstruck comics by Elaine Lee and Michael Kaluta, as well as Dungeon Meshi, again, by Ryoko Kui. They're all really deeply insightful and hilarious, and they like to turn common fantasy and sci-fi stories inside out, and I really enjoy them.
No, that's lovely. I just had to ask as well because the mix of comedy and insightful themes and thoughts that you explore on The Lost while also being very silly is a paragon of Star Trek, and there's a lot of visual elements that remind me of Star Trek as I read. Were you inspired by that at all?
Probably not directly, but I think Star Trek has inspired a lot of other sci-fi stuff, you know? I think it's so awesome that we can all have, like, there's this cultural backdrop, things that inspire everything that comes after. And while I wasn't directly inspired by Star Trek, because I'm pretty sure the only Star Trek I've ever seen was the episode that we watched together a while ago, I know for a fact that it is absolutely an inspiration of my inspirations, you know? Shout out Star Trek.
The grandfather of it all.
Yes.
Tell the people where they can find you online and where they can find The Lost.
You can find me pretty much everywhere online as A Little Warlord. That's on YouTube, that's on Tumblr, that's on Instagram, and anywhere you think I might have an account, that's probably the name I have. Read The Lost at thelost.space, and you can check out early access options on my Patreon, which is PKFin. Thinking about opening up a free tier early access in the new year.
You're on Twitch as well, right?
Yes, Twitch as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here and talking about The Lost.
Of course, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yes, of course. So to the people listening, I will put the link to The Lost in the description, as well as the social media where you can find this incredible author, this incredibly talented illustrator, and literal comic book artist who happens to be wonderful friends of mine. So thank you so much, and
Thank you.
I will see you guys in the next video next Friday.